What if I told you some spirits never left their graves, and tonight they might be watching you? If you love ghost stories, hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video so we can bring you even more terrifying tales. Subscribe, like, share to keep the ghosts coming. The sea has a memory. It remembers not through words, but through motion, the pull and surrender of tides, the way waves curl and vanish only to return again. Tireless, patient, unending, it carries the names of the drowned, the prayers of fishermen, and the sighs of gods who were forgotten when humankind learned to build walls between land and faith. Along Japan's western coast, where the Sea of Japan meets the bones of Fukui Prefecture, there stands a lonely shrine once tended by the hands of salt-stained monks. The cedar trees lean toward the waves as if listening. At night, the wind moves through the forest like someone whispering beneath their breath, and at the center of that shrine, before it was sealed, before it was lost, there stood an object no larger than a child's arm, a doll, not porcelain, not clay, something stranger. The villagers called it Ningyo Ningyō, the mermaid doll. It was said to have been found in the year of the Great Typhoon, 1862, when half the coastline drowned. They said a fisherman brought it ashore, tangled in his net, wrapped in strands of black seaweed and pale, glimmering scales that refused to dry. The creature, if it had ever been alive, was already half decayed. Its body resembled that of a fish split open, but the upper half, the face, that was something else entirely, human, or nearly so. To keep the ocean from reclaiming the village, the local monk performed a rite of sealing. He burned incense from the deep forest, wrapped the remains in sacred paper, and placed them within a carved wooden doll, part talisman, part coffin. It was never meant to be worshipped, only appeased. But fear has a way of becoming faith. For decades, the villagers came to bow before the doll, to leave offerings of salt and sake, to whisper prayers before setting sail. They believed the Ningyo spirit guarded them so long as they never forgot to pay respect. Some claimed the waves stayed calm whenever they left gifts at the shrine. Others said the doll's eyes glistened like wet pearls even on the driest day. And then, one winter, a traveling scholar visited the coast. His name was Satoru, a young folklorist from Kyoto who had spent his career chasing stories that flickered between myth and memory. He came seeking relics of Japan's maritime faiths, the old spirits of the sea. Long before the word yokai became entertainment, when he first entered the shrine, the air was damp with the scent of rot and incense. Cobwebs hung like seaweed from the rafters. The monk who once tended the place had died years ago, and the village itself was nearly abandoned. Satoru brushed the dust from the altar, and there she was, the doll resting within a cracked glass case. He would later write in his journal, her eyes were not painted. They were real, black and wet, as if looking out from beneath water. The mouth was open, small and sorrowful, and I thought I could smell salt in her breath. He didn't know it yet, but by that evening, the tide had already begun to turn. The Ningyo legend is as old as Japan itself. Ancient scrolls describe mermaid-like creatures whose flesh grants eternal youth. To catch or eat one was both a blessing and a curse. The eater would live forever, but misfortune would haunt their descendants. The most famous story tells of a girl named Yobikuni who accidentally ate Ningyo meat and lived 8 centuries before finally turning into mist. Satoru knew these tales well. He had devoted his life to proving that behind myth lay history, that every ghost was once flesh. So he took the doll from the shrine, promising to preserve it. He told himself it was science, but as the sea darkened behind him, the fishermen on the pier refused to meet his eyes. Once you take her inland, an old man said, the sea will come looking. Satoru smiled politely. He did not believe in curses. That night, he boarded the last train to Kyoto. The doll sat in a wooden box beside him. Outside, the rain turned the window into shifting glass. Each flash of lightning illuminated the faint outline of her silhouette. Watching At one point, Satoru thought he heard water dripping from the box. But when he checked, it was dry. Only the faint smell of salt lingered, thick as memory. Weeks later, the doll sat in his apartment. He had placed her on a table beside his desk, surrounded by notebooks and tape recorders. He planned to study the materials used: wood, scale, hair, everything except the eyes. Those eyes disturbed him. He recorded notes daily. At first, they were rational descriptions, measurements, folklore references. Then, gradually, his tone shifted. I hear it again, he wrote one night. A humming sound, like a lullaby underwater. The glass fogs from inside. When I sleep, I dream of the ocean. I wake with sand on my floor. Satoru stopped inviting colleagues to visit. He stopped answering calls. Neighbors complained of strange noises sloshing water, faint singing, whispers in an unknown language. Once, a tenant below his apartment swore she saw water dripping from her ceiling. Maintenance workers found nothing. On the 15th night, a blackout rolled through the district. When power returned, Satoru's room was found flooded waist-deep in seawater. His notebooks floated like jellyfish around the desk. Of Satoru, there was no trace. Only the doll remained floating face up, her hair spreading like ink. The police labeled it a disappearance. The reports mentioned the flooding but offered no explanation. The case was forgotten. I have seen this before. I see it always. The Ningyo Ningyō does not kill in malice. She remembers. She calls those who disturb her back to the sea. To her, possession is not vengeance, it is reunion. Years passed, and the doll changed hands again. A museum in Tokyo acquired her under the guise of cultural preservation. Curators noted the artifact's unsettling humidity, the way condensation gathered no matter the temperature. They joked about ghosts. They laughed until the curator's daughter fell ill. The child was 7. She told her mother she dreamed of a woman with seaweed hair, singing to her from beneath the floorboards. The dreams continued for weeks. Then, one morning, the girl was found unconscious beside the display case, lungs full of salt water. The exhibit was closed immediately. The doll was sealed, catalogued as object hashtag A-1137, unclassified marine effigy. No one opened the box again, but the smell of brine never left the room. I drift through time like foam across waves, seeing centuries collapse into one another. The same faces appear, only changed by the years. The monk who sealed her, the scholar who studied her, the child who dreamed of her song, all drawn by curiosity, all consumed by it. The Ningyo Ningyō is not a single object. She is a mirror in which the sea reflects the souls of those who forget its hunger. She is the weight of history pressing against the thin glass between worlds. And sometimes, when the moon pulls the tide too far, she remembers her own face, what she was before the wood and scales, before the prayers, before the silence. The doll begins to breathe. One spring evening, more than a century after her creation, a journalist named Mika Arai arrived at the abandoned temple in Fukui. She was researching a documentary series about haunted artifacts of Japan. The temple was overgrown, half swallowed by moss and mist. She carried a camera, a notebook, and an exhaustion she could not name. The villagers warned her politely not to stay after dusk. She laughed, promising she'd be careful. Yet, as the light faded, the air changed. The sound of waves came from nowhere, though the ocean was miles away. Inside the shrine, she found remnants of offerings, bowls of salt hardened to crystal, rice turned to dust, and carved into the wood above the altar were the words, "Do not open what remembers." But the box was gone. Only the faint shape of where it had once rested remained, an absence like a wound. Mika set up her camera. She recorded the empty altar, the silence. But when she replayed the footage that night something impossible appeared. Behind her, for just a second, a shape, long hair, pale face, eyes too large, watching from the dark. The next morning, she returned to Tokyo and refused to finish her documentary. In interviews years later, she would only say one thing: the sea follows you even when you leave it behind. That is how her story begins, not with death, but with remembrance. The Ningyo Ningyō is a wound carved into time, a whisper caught between breath and tide. She is not gone, because the sea never lets go, and the sea, tonight, is restless again. It begins with the sound of dripping water, not from a leak, not from rain, but from nowhere at all. Each drop lands softly on the wooden floor, darkening it like a pulse. Mika Arai hears it in her Tokyo apartment, weeks after her trip to Fukui, after she swore she had left the coast behind. She wakes at night to the smell of seawater. The curtains move though the windows are shut, and always, that faint lullaby, indistinct, local, half-heard, like a memory sung through another person's dream. At first, she tells herself it's stress. Journalists chasing ghosts often become their own victims. She edits her unfinished footage obsessively, replaying that one moment, the shape in the darkness, trying to convince herself it's a trick of light, a reflection. But every time she watches, the shape is closer. By the 7th replay, the figure isn't behind her anymore. It's looking directly into the lens. Tokyo holds its own kind of silence. One made not of emptiness but of noise piled upon noise. Cars, voices, neon hum. Yet under that, there's another rhythm. The soft whisper of forgotten spirits, drowned beneath modernity. Mika begins to hear them. In the subway, the roar of trains becomes a rushing tide. At intersections, she smells seaweed and rust. The city begins to taste of salt. Her producer calls. They want the next episode. Mika lies and says she's working on it, but all she can think about is the Ningyo doll. She researches obsessively through university archives, folklore books, forgotten online forums. The name Ningyo Ningyō appears in scattered fragments. A 1902 article mentions a fishwoman effigy exhumed from a flooded temple. A classified museum inventory from 1956 lists specimen A, 1137, composition unknown. A handwritten note in the margin, eyes organic, subject emits humidity. She finds one more clue, a journal from Professor Tadashi Onoda, the folklorist who vanished decades ago. It had been digitized by a university student and uploaded quietly to a database. If she sings, he wrote, it means she remembers your name. Mika stares at that line for hours. Her name, the voice, the song. That night, the dreams return. She's standing on a dark shore. The moon is swollen and low, pulling the ocean up like a curtain. The air is heavy with brine and whispering voices. The water recedes, revealing thousands of dolls scattered along the sand, headless, limbless, all facing the same direction, toward the sea. Then one of them moves. The Ningyo Ningyō rises, dripping and half luminous, her hair floating as though still submerged. Her face is not carved wood anymore, it's flesh, half translucent, veins faintly glowing beneath. Her eyes open, black and full of tide. Return it, she whispers. Return what you took. Mika wakes, gasping, her sheets soaked. The apartment smells like the sea again. For days, she tries to ignore it. She attends meetings, edits footage, smiles on the outside, while her mind rots quietly underneath. But the haunting doesn't relent. It evolves. The lights flicker when she's near the computer. Files corrupt themselves. In one clip, where she's walking through the temple ruins, the audio changes a low, rhythmic sound layered beneath her footsteps. When slowed down, it's not static, it's breathing, and then a voice, distant but clear. Mika. She slams the laptop shut. The next morning, she finds puddles forming beneath her desk. She blames the air conditioner, the pipes, any explanation that doesn't involve what she already knows. But denial is brittle, and the cracks are showing. By the third week, Mika decides to seek help. She visits Professor Harukanda, a retired folklorist who once worked on maritime legends. His small office smells of incense and old paper. When Mika explains the doll, the footage, the dreams, the professor listens without interrupting. His eyes, ancient and tired, carry recognition. I know of her, he says softly. The Ning, a forbidden vessel. He explains that such dolls were not toys but tsukumogami, objects that acquire spirits after 100 years of existence. Most are harmless, umbrellas, combs, tools. But when an object is born from something that already possessed a soul, like the remains of a Ningyo, it becomes something far more dangerous. It remembers suffering. He tells her, and it seeks continuity. If the body decays, it looks for another form: wood, water, dream. You have seen her because she chose you. Mika's throat tightened. Why me? Because you filmed her. You gave her reflection. You made her story live again. Mika leaves the office shaken. The professor's words cling to her like humidity. She rides the train home, staring at her reflection in the window, and for one fleeting second, the reflection smiles, though she does not. That night, the dripping returns, faster now, more deliberate, like footsteps pacing through the apartment. Mika gathers her courage, following the sound to the bathroom. The bathtub is half filled, the faucet is off, the water is dark, rippling slightly though nothing touches it, and beneath the surface, she sees hair, long, black, moving. The lights die a dot when they flicker back. The tub is empty. Only a ring of salt remains around the porcelain dot. There are rules in every haunting, patterns that reveal themselves to those who survive long enough to notice. Mika begins keeping a journal, not for work but for sanity. She records times, temperatures, the sound of waves, her dreams. June 12th, woke up to see smell again, the sound of bells underwater, someone whispering numbers. June 13th, fish scales on kitchen floor. No fish in the house. June 14th. Voice clearer now. Says, the sea remembers. By the 15th entry, the handwriting trembles. She hasn't eaten in days. Her eyes ache from lack of sleep. Every sound of water, even the hiss of her kettle, makes her flinch. But there's something else. Amid the fear, an odd empathy grows. The voice isn't malicious. It sounds lonely. When she listens closely, it's almost pleading. Remember me. Curiosity and compassion when poisons of the human soul lead Mika back to Fukui. She takes the first morning train, camera in hand, though she no longer knows why she films. The coastline greets her with mist, heavy and low. The shrine still stands in ruin, cedar trees bent as if exhausted. But now, she notices something new. The air hums faintly, a vibration more felt than heard. She sets her recorder down. Through the static comes a voice. Why do you search for me? Mika freezes. Who are you? She whispers. The one you woke. The sea roars suddenly. Though the day is calm, the ground trembles beneath her feet. She looks toward the horizon and sees the water retreating unnaturally far, exposing rocks and sand like a receding breath. Then, from the depths, she rises. The Ningyo spirit, luminous and dreadful, her body half human, half ocean. Her hair flows upward like a tide reversed. The doll's form has melted away, leaving only the essence pale, glimmering. Infinite sadness. You carry my reflection, the spirit says, voice both whisper and thunder. You remember what they tried to forget. The camera shakes. The world tilts. Mika can't breathe. The air itself becomes water. When she wakes, it's night. The shrine is gone. In its place stands an empty beach. The tide has returned, but her camera lies half buried in sand. Still recording. The screen shows static. Then her face, pale and terrified, muttering words she doesn't recall saying. She's inside the lens. She's waiting for the sea to call her home. She flees, but as the train carries her inland, droplets form on the window. Salt water again, running upward instead of down. The passengers don't notice. She realizes then that she's alone in the carriage. No reflections but her own. And even that one is starting to blink out of sync. Some hauntings are not curses, but transmissions. They move through story, through retelling, through those who cannot help but look. The Ningyo Ningyō spreads not by touch but by attention. The more you know her name, the more she remembers yours. The files Mika left behind show this. Researchers who opened them began reporting dreams of the sea. One drowned, one disappeared, one kept hearing the same phrase on loop. The sea has many mouths, and she speaks through them all. Now, her legend exists, not in shrines or temples, but in the digital ether, floating through servers, archived videos, forgotten folders labeled Project_Ningyo. The song continues, reshaped by code and electricity, but the sorrow remains unchanged, and somewhere, deep beneath Japan's restless waters, a voice hums through fiber optic cables and waves alike, searching for the next soul willing to listen. The haunting is no longer contained to a doll, nor to the sea. It is a memory replicated endlessly. When you play her footage, she looks back. When you hear her song, she remembers your name. When you close your eyes near running water, you might dream of her again. And when you wake, your breath might taste faintly, just faintly, of salt. The sea does not forgive, but it never forgets, and neither does she.
The shrine was never meant to hold anything so ancient. Even the wood itself seemed to groan under the burden of what it had come to contain. The Ningyo Ningyō sealed again, wrapped in salt-soaked silk, yet restless in its confinement. The priests prayed, the waves rose, and time itself seemed to ripple around the thing that was never meant to exist on land. But the sea remembers. When the final night began, no one in the village slept. The fishermen had long abandoned their boats. The children had been taken inland, and the air thick with salt and incense buzzed with the low hum of fear. The storm had been building for days, gathering far out beyond the horizon like a living thought, something vast and wounded drawing near. Inside the shrine, the woman remained Ako Tanabe, last caretaker, last believer. She had spent nights whispering into the dark, her candle trembling as she recorded her final confessions on a battered cassette recorder. Her voice trembled between devotion and delirium. "If she comes," Ako whispered, "I will not resist. She only wants to go home." The wind keened through the cracks in the shrine walls, sounding almost like the moan of the deep, and the doll began to move again. It was subtle at first, a faint shift of the cloth, a shadow rippling where none should exist. The scent of brine filled the air. From somewhere unseen came the sound of dripping water. Though the floor was dry, the candlelight flickered violently, bending backward against a gust that hadn't yet arrived. Then came the sound, a low, inhuman cry, muffled as though carried from miles beneath the ocean floor. They called her Ningyō Mermaid Dollbutt. In truth, she was no creation of human hands. The hair had grown longer now, its once brittle strands slick with moisture. Tiny beads of water clung to the strands, shimmering like pearls. And behind her glassy eyes, something blinked up the tapes that Echo left behind, captured the moment before the veil broke. They have been studied, cleaned, amplified, but the core sound remains. Wrong. Voices underwater, syllables stretched and distorted, a human woman murmuring, a second voice gurgling. You are not alone, it says, but the tone carries no comfort. You have remembered my name, and so it began the convergence. Villagers later said the sea itself came walking inland that night, that they saw phantom waves rolling through the streets, silver-scaled fish gasping in mid-air, lanterns extinguished by invisible hands. Some said they saw women with hair like kelp and eyes like pearls drifting through the rain, humming lullabies from another century. The police reports from that night read like madness, doors that bled saltwater, statues that whispered prayers in reverse, a smell of rot that wasn't decay, but memory. And above it all, the old shrine bell rang, not once, not twice, 13 times, each toll echoing across the drowned valley like the heartbeat of the forgotten inside. Echo knelt before the altar, her recorder still ran, her words barely audible over the storm. She forgives us, she said softly, but forgiveness does not mean mercy. The doors burst open, rain and seawater collided, surging in like an exorcism reversed. The doll was no longer on its pedestal, it floated in the air, suspended by invisible currents. Its mouth, once sealed with string, had split open, not a human scream, but the shrill cry of a dying ocean. Through that sound, shapes began to emerge. They were neither ghosts nor spirits as human folklore would name them. They were echo souls of the drowned, remnants of sailors, fishermen, offerings thrown into the tide. The air shimmered with the shimmer of fins and hair, their eyes empty yet bright with something older than pity. One reached toward Echo, its hand translucent, webbed, trembling. Come back to the sea, it whispered at a voice that was not one, but many. Eiko did not scream. She stood, tears of salt tracing her face, and stepped forward. For a moment, just one, she was weightless, luminous, becoming one with the tide that rose through the floorboards. The candle extinguished, the shrine bell rang one last time, and the world fell silent. Morning found only ruin. The storm had retreated, leaving behind a landscape remade by grief. Where the shrine had stood was now a basin of salt and broken beams. No body was ever found, only the cassette recorder, half buried in silt, its final minutes filled with the sound of rushing water and faint, almost tender singing. When the tape was analyzed, the singing formed no recognizable melody, but beneath it, experts detected a pattern, rhythmic, deliberate like a heartbeat, repeating 3 syllables again and again. Ningyō Ningyō, and then silence. But the sea did not stop taking. Over the next year, 12 more coastal towns reported similar anomalies. Dolls found washed ashore with hair of seaweed and scales of faded paint. In one case, a fisherman's daughter claimed to hear a woman's voice calling her from beneath the waves. When she followed, she disappeared. Tourists came and went, snapping photos, dismissing the legends as folklore. But those who lingered near the old coastline began to dream of her. Dreams filled with silver eyes beneath the surface, of whispers promising release. And always, at the end, a voice asking softly, "Do you remember my name?" The ocean has its own theology. It never forgets what is taken from it, nor what was stolen to amuse humankind. And so, the Ningyo Ningyō is not gone. She drifts between worlds, part relic, part revenant, part warning. They say when the tide recedes far enough, and the beach reveals its hidden bones, you can still find her fragments there. A shard of porcelain, a strand of hair, a song half sung. The ghost does not haunt a place, she haunts the memory of human arrogance. For in the end, every myth, every doll, every ghost is only this, a reflection of what we tried to own and what refused to belong.
Time has no meaning near the sea. Waves erase all evidence, footsteps, offerings, even grief. And yet, there are always things the tide returns. It began again 3 years after the Tanabe incident. An earthquake struck off the coast of Shizuoka, small enough not to make the news, but strong enough to stir the silt beneath the ocean floor. Fishermen reported strange lights rising from the depths, glowing spheres that shimmered like eyes, opening beneath the dark surface. And one morning, tangled in the nets of a trawler, they found her, the doll. The Ningyo. At first, the crew thought it was just debris, but when they lifted it onto the deck, the air turned cold. The thing was wet, though it had come from a part of the sea where nothing should live. Its hair floated in coils of black silk, glistening with brine, and its painted lips still parted in that silent, eternal song were stained blue. The captain, an old man named Hiroto Abe, had heard the legends. He'd grown up in a coastal village, where his grandmother told him to never look too long at the ocean at night, because the sea watches back. But even so, he laughed. "It's just a doll," he said. "A toy washed up from some old wreck." They wrapped it in tarp and stowed it below deck. But that night, the waves grew violent. The boat's instruments went haywire. Compasses spun endlessly. The sonar displayed impossible depth chasms that seemed to open beneath them like yawning mouths. The crew reported hearing whispering from the cargo hold, and once someone swore they saw a woman's reflection in the dark water, though no one was leaning overboard. By dawn, they were gone. All that was ever found was the boat itself, drifting near the Key Peninsula, completely empty. Every clock aboard had stopped at 3:33 a.m., and in the galley, nailed to the wall with a rusted fish, was a single word written in salt: home. The Ningyo Ningyō was never recovered, at least not officially. Because 3 months later, a parcel arrived at a university in Kyoto. No return address, no sender. Inside was a glass display case filled with seawater, and floating within it, the Mermaid doll. A short note, smeared with brine, accompanied it. "The sea doesn't give back what you steal. It only lends it to your nightmares." Dr. Renji Yamashita, professor of maritime anthropology, took the artifact into custody. His diary, found years later in his sealed apartment, described his descent with unnerving precision. "The doll breathes when I turn away," he wrote on day 4. "Its eyes follow me. Sometimes I hear singing behind the walls." By day 10, the handwriting changed, letters smudged by moisture, margins filled with salt crystals. "She's not a ghost. She's a boundary between the living and the drowned." Neighbors said Yamashita stopped leaving his apartment after the second week. Maintenance staff complained of water leaking from the floorboards above. When they finally entered, they found no body, only the doll, sitting upright on his desk, hair dripping, mouth open in an expression that looked almost human. On his tape recorder, the final message played on loop: "It's not the sea that haunts us, it's what we've taken from it." After that, stories began to multiply. Online forums, haunted artifact collectors, late-night television specials. Everyone wanted to see it, to own it, to film it, but every attempt ended the same way, with disappearance, madness, or inexplicable flooding. The world began to forget again, as it always does. Legends turn into fear becomes entertainment. Until one winter, a vlogger named Mina Sato uploaded a video titled "Unboxing Japan's Cursed Mermaid Doll." The footage was chaotic, almost playful at first: 2 girls laughing, bright lights, the plastic peeling away from an ornate box. Then came the silence. The camera shook. The laughter stopped. For 10 full seconds, nothing happened. Then Mina whispered, "It's breathing." The video cut to static. When police entered her apartment 3 days later, they found her phone submerged in a basin of salt water. The screen still glowed faintly. The final frame of the video showed the doll sitting on the counter, head tilted toward the lens. It looked like it was smiling. And then the world moved on. The file disappeared. The police called it viral fabrication. But the ocean continued its quiet breathing against the shore, like a sleeper turning in her dreams. I drift through the ages. I have seen the shape of her reflection in the waves that never rest. The Ningyo Ningyō does not haunt as a ghost does. She waits. Each time a fisherman casts his net, each time a diver cuts through coral, each time someone whispers her name in curiosity, she hears. And one night soon, when the moon drowns itself in the horizon, she will rise again. For the sea is a graveyard of human desire. We have thrown so many prayers into its depths, so many bodies, so many promises. But what we forget is that the sea keeps them all. Some nights, the waves sing, a melody low and full of sorrow. traveling across the currents to those who dare listen. If you stand at the edge long enough, you'll hear the song of something ancient, neither living nor dead, whispering from beneath. Do you remember my name? And if you answer, if you even think the name, you will see her, a pale figure rising through the black water, hair flowing like ink, eyes reflecting the moon, hands reaching, gentle, patient, eternal, and you'll feel the pull, not down, but homeward. Because in the end, every ghost is just a memory, searching for its source, and every human heart is an ocean, waiting to drown in what it once loved. The Ningyo Ningyō waits there between the pulse of the tide and the silence of the deep, forever humming the song of the lost. The sea breathes in, the world holds its breath, and somewhere in the dark, porcelain cracks, as if the ocean itself has begun to wake.